Hey everybody, Grayson here, Gundam Gambler. So today we're going to continue looking at all the sets in Gundam so far. We're going to look at all of them though. I thought about doing a video for every set, but I feel like we're just going to make a longer one here, condense the rest, and then you guys will have a good idea of where to put your money. So we'll start with Dual Impact, then we'll go over to New Type Rising, then we'll touch on Eternal Nexus, and we're also going to touch on the Edition Beta, the Beta booster box, because there are a lot of expensive cards in there, and it is technically a booster box, so we're going to take a look at that. But starting off, Dual Impact, $127.22, up 55% over the past 6 months. This is something nobody's paid attention to, and you're still seeing ridiculous returns on it. Now, when we look at the cards inside of here, my understanding, based on what people have told me, the Barbatos is very popular, and that's why it's done incredibly well, up 110% over the past 6 months. But we look at recent sales, $1,200, $1,300. That is a lot higher than TCG player price. Realistically, this has gone from 400 up to around 1,300. You've more than 3x your money in 6 months. That is pretty good, right, on any investment. So when we look at the chart that we're making in the spreadsheet, just know that these numbers are definitely off a little bit for some of these sets, just because TCG player pricing, it's not perfect. But when we look at Dual Impact, $855 top hit, it's over $1,000. Top 5, $1,500. Realistically, that might be over $2K. And then top 10 value currently, $1,600, $1,700 in that range. So a little bit higher value, in my opinion, compared to Steel Requiem. The booster box is slightly more expensive. That said, though, if I had to choose between these two sets, I would probably go with Dual Impact. If I have to choose out of these three, and I'll get to this later on in the video, I would go with Phantom Aria currently. But just looking at the other cards inside the top 10, we have another LR++ here. This is going for around $400. Recent sales maybe a little bit higher. And then after that, we have a few LRs in there. Whoops, I didn't bring them all up, but the Gundam Epion, I brought that one up. And then we have another Barbatos in there, Gundam Gujin, Talgis. Again, I'm going to be butchering a lot of these names. Psycho Gundam, 4 Murasami, and then Garrett Ran and Tifa. That's going to be your top 10 cards. And right outside the top 10, you do have the resource, the C++, which my understanding, you're guaranteed one of these in every single case. So you're going to get at least 20 bucks, guys, when you open a Gundam case. Obviously, it's a lot higher than that. That's a terrible joke, Grayson. But moving on, let's go over to New Type Rising, $375. This is probably the best investment so far for most people. If you got into the beta boxes or some of the cards, percentage-wise, you've done better. But I think most people looked at GDO1, first set of a new game, it's a Bandai game, might as well pick up a little bit. And that was kind of my thought process back late last year when I bought one box of GDO1 after that reprint. They were sitting around $140, $150. It didn't do much for a while there, but we've had a crazy run up to around $375. It is starting to level out at this price. Maybe there's been a little bit more demand recently. But yeah, still solid growth on this box. The reprint definitely did a little bit of damage to it. But when we look at New Type Rising, you do have a lot of value in these cards. And again, this is actually probably the most important set to make that note of TCG player price not being realistic. So $954 top hit, top 5 value $2,400, top 10 value about $2,800. It's already higher than every other set, which is great. But when we look at some of the cards in here, for example, the top hit LR++ Gundam, this is realistically a $2,000 to $2,500 card. Even if we want to be conservative and call it 2K, we're going to have to add about $1,000 already to that top 10 value. The Gundam Aerial Rebuild, another one of these LR++, is $775. It's selling over $1,000 very consistently, so add another $300 there. The Overflowing Affection is about $340. I checked that one. You have the Wing Gundam Zero, over a couple $100. Meridia Cruise, that's going to be your top 5. That's $120. And then outside your top 5, right out the top 10, another LR Plus, another one here too, $81. Basically every card in the top 10 is over $60. You do have the Resource C++. and a lot of other cards that are in that $40, $50, $30 range, some in the 20s too. It has a lot of depth. Like, you can understand why people want to open these booster boxes when they're $100, $115, $120, because you can get a decent amount of value out of them. The EV really isn't that bad. But if we hop back over to the spreadsheet, top 10 value 2,800, I would say add $1,300 conservatively to that. Maybe it's even closer to $1,500. So we're looking at $4,100 to $4,200 in top 10 value. Now, obviously, you do have to consider more than just the value of the cards inside of a booster box. If you're looking at the booster box price, would you rather buy one GD1 box right now, or would you rather buy almost 5 booster boxes of Phantom Aria? For me, I would prefer to go with Phantom Aria, and that's why I actually just picked up a case from Hobbiesville. And these prices are in Canadian. I'm from Canada, for anyone who doesn't know that, but 130 Canadian, you're looking at around $90, $95 USD all in. Maybe it's slightly more depending on where you are, like which province, if you're getting charged HST versus just GST or something from Alberta, but they're a pretty good resource to buy from right now. But those are going to be your mainline sets. I think right now, GDO4, it's pretty solid value. I would also get a little bit of exposure to New Type Rising just because it is the first set, and you do have some very expensive chase cards. I mean, over $2,000 ungraded, guys. You don't see that in even a lot of One Piece sets at this point. The manga is generally going for, $700, $800 ungraded. When you look at Pokemon, obviously top hits are almost never over $1,000, let alone $2,000. Lorcana, you do still have some fairly expensive cards. I think Dragon Ball 2, Magic, of course, there's a ton of expensive ungraded cards, but for a box that's sub $400, I think it's decent to get a little bit there. EBO1, we'll touch on this quickly, Eternal Nexus. Price is coming down a little bit on TCG Player from around 160 to around 140, but that's still fairly expensive for a Gundam booster box, especially a new release. It's more expensive than everything outside of New Type Rising. The top hits currently $1,200. That is the Phoenix Gundam. We've covered this before. Out the gate, this was selling for closer to $1,500, almost $1,600. Recent sales closer to $1,100, which is still amazing for a top chase in this game. Outside the Phoenix Gundam, you don't really have anything crazy in this set. You have some LR pluses that are $30, $40, $45 maybe, but not a ton of depth in this. It really does remind me of EBO1 from One Piece, where the chopper was incredibly expensive. Maybe that was a little bit more top heavy because you had the Bond clay that was playable, him cosplaying as Nami. But outside of that, nothing crazy. Most cards were $20, $30. So very reminiscent of EBO1 from One Piece. Either way, the play here, in my opinion, is the scarcity. The fact that a lot of people are reporting that there's not as much EBO1 out there compared to the mainline sets like GDO4, GDO3. And I think that's apparent with the sell-through. Only 605 boxes. And some of that was pre-release too. A lot of it, though, after release of the set. Whereas when you look at something like, I guess GDO2 will suffice. If we hop back over here, over the past year, you've had almost 4,800 boxes sell on TCG Player. Most of that was obviously at release, but still 1,800, almost 1,900 boxes in a 6-month period. Really not that bad. And I think most of you guys know this already, but I did pre-order a case of EBO1 that has arrived. I also have a couple loose boxes coming in the mail. Now, I don't know if I'm going to hold those as investments. I'm very tempted to just open a couple boxes, get a better idea of how the cards feel, what the quality is. And most people have told me it's very high, and I don't expect less from Bandai. They tend to give us very good cards, but just to, get a little bit of an education on the opening experience in this game. So I think gain a little bit of EBO1, it's not that bad. I'm also in talks right now, moving on to the next set, to get a beta box. Now, for a lot of you guys, buying a beta box is probably not going to be a good idea. If you're only wanting to invest a couple $100 into this game, go with something like GDO4, maybe wait for GDO5. I think that's perfectly fine. My philosophy, when I'm looking at the value of a lot of the cards, quite expensive. So the box is going for over 2K, which is obviously very expensive. MSRP was $60 or $70, but top 10 value over 20K. That is no joke. And realistically, it's probably a lot higher than this. There's almost no sales data on eBay. When we look at TCG player prices, sure, like there's the odd sale. Maybe I would say out of the top 10 cards, maybe there's been 20 sales over the past 6 months. Like it's almost non-existent. I did look on eBay. There are a few selling. So the Gundam Aerial, this is, I believe, an R+. It's not even the LR+ down here. Yeah, so that's about 2K. According to 130 Point, the most recent sale, $2,200. And that was back in April. You had another one in April, $2,500. And then a very expensive sale here, almost $3,800 back in February. And I did find some more recent sales. So this is the AL Strike Gundam in a PSA 10. This is pop 57. So not a ton of these out there. Fairly easy to grade too, similar to One Piece stuff. This sold for $4,500 or best offer. According to 130 Point, it went for 3.5K. And that was just a couple days ago, July 2nd. Before that, back in May, we had a 4K sale. You had a $2,000 auction that ended in March. So recent sales closer to 4K there. And then obviously the bigger hitters here. Soletta Mercury, PSA 10, $4,300 on auction. This sold just a couple days ago, pop 46. Nice looking card as well. And then the big boy, the Wing Gundam, PSA 10. This is pop 88. This sold for $15,000. And this was back early June, so about a month ago at this point. But there is a difference between the PSA 10 and the BGS 10, similar with a lot of One Piece top chases, whether it's the mangas or the SSPs. Because they're so so easy to grade, you are going to have that premium on Beckett because I think they're a little bit more stringent with what they allow to be a 10. And to illustrate this, I did find a BGS 10 pristine that sold about a month ago too, June 10th, 25.5K or best offer. According to 130 Point, it sold for $23,500. So 23.5K versus 15,000. That is a decent premium. And either way, right? This being the top chase of the beta box, $15,000, $20,000 graded. That is amazing, right? So I think there is value for some of you guys who are long-term investors who are building very large portfolios to get a booster box. I'm trying to get one of these beta boxes. If I do get one, I will let you guys know. Trying to work out a trade right now. So hopeful about that. But overall, I think going for GDO4 is fine. I think if you want to buy a little bit of every set, that's also fine. Get a little bit of EBO1. And then for you guys who are really balling out, if you want to buy a beta box, I think it's worth the risk. And again, if you don't mess with sealed product, which is my strategy because I don't know enough about the Gundam TCG yet to really dive into singles. If you know more and you feel very confident that you can pick the best cards that are the most popular mobile suits or characters or whatever, right? Go for the cards. I mean, if we look at Dual Impact, the Barbatos, up over 100% in 6 months. That is much better than the return on the booster box. Looking at the Gundam, you could have bought this a year ago for sub $400, and it's now selling, most recent sale, $2,500 almost, right? Like that is a 5x, 6x on your money in a year. You're not finding that in Pokemon. You're not finding that in One Piece anymore, with a few exceptions. Maybe Lorcana, recently you've been able to do that, but this is something that no one's paid attention to, and you've been able to get those returns. Now, the final thing I want to say in this video before we get out of here is that I would wait for GDO5 to be fully leaked and maybe even released before you make massive purchases in Gundam. You know, when One Piece came out, Romance Dawn, it was a decent set, but then you look at OP2, OP3, OP4, they were decent at the time maybe, but looking back on it, those sets are very weak, and I have a suspicion GDO5 is probably going to blow these sets out of the water in terms of top 1, 5, 10 values. And in a year from now, 2 years from now, if the game's still around, GDO5 could look a lot like OPO5, which is one of the best sets ever released in One Piece. So I would probably wait. I'm planning to build a very large position in GDO5 if the price is right. If things are way too expensive, well then we'll put money elsewhere. But that's kind of my plan going forward. You guys let me know in the comments down below what you think. Are you buying sealed product? Are you buying slabs? If you do want to pick up some GDO4 and support the channel, I'll leave a link to some of these boxes on Hobbiesville. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you had a great weekend. Stay safe wherever you are in the world, and I'll catch you in the next one.